Welcome to This Week in Christian History, a podcast from the Center for Christian History at Mississippi College. The Center for Christian History is dedicated to expanding knowledge and understanding of Christian history. Our mission is to provide a scholarly, unbiased look at the events, figures, and movements that have shaped Christianity over the centuries. You can visit centerforchristianhistory.com for daily historical highlights. And each week on this podcast, we'll do a deep dive into key moments with Christian history's leading authorities. Our first historical highlight of the week and the subject of our deep dive is the founding of the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. J. Gresham Machen, a professor of New Testament at Princeton, felt that Princeton's governing body, the United Presbyterian Church, had become too liberal. In Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on June 11, 1936, Machen and others broke away from the UPC and formed what would become the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. Our next historical highlight concerns the Continental Congress and the birth of America. April 19, 1775 marked the day that the shot heard round the world took place, as British and American troops fired on each other and the American Revolution began. On June 12, 1775, less than 2 months after that event, the Continental Congress called for Americans to fast and to pray for the Lord to bless the new nation. Our final historical highlight for the week is G.K. Chesterton, one of the most prolific Christian writers of the 20th century. Chesterton penned 100 books, 200 short stories, and over 4,000 essays. He authored the Father Brown Mystery Series and contributed to well over 200 books in addition to those he authored. A devout Roman Catholic, his books influenced men like Gandhi and C.S. Lewis. Chesterton died in London, England, on June 14, 1936. Today in our deep dive, Nick Walters, director of the Center for Christian History, talks with John Muether of Reformed Theological Seminary, Orlando, about the founding of the Orthodox Presbyterian Church.
Hey, welcome back to yet another great episode of This Week in Christian History. And today's episode is centered around an event that happened on June the 11th, 1936, which is the founding of what will be known as the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. And so in America, and we'll learn a heck of a lot more about all of those moving parts. So John Muether is with us. He is a professor of church history at the Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, and also runs all of the or looks over, how about that, all of the libraries throughout all the campuses for RTS. So, John, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a privilege to be here.
Well, fantastic. Well, this is, for some people who are not Presbyterian, and quite frankly, probably some people who are Presbyterian might not be aware of all of these different iterations that were all of these different conferences and these different associations and different types of membership. And, one of the things that we talk about here when we're doing at our Center for Christian History is we don't spend a whole lot of time trying to really talk more about specific doctrine or theology. We're talking much more about history, but on an occasion where doctrine and theology are making part of the history, right? We certainly want to be able to talk about that. So why don't you, if you will, just kind of start us off about what was going on and what led to the date, at least, that we are kicking around and discussing today.
Sure. The story of the Orthodox Presbyterian Church is part of the broader picture of what many call the split peas of American Presbyterianism.
Right.
If you've seen charts of the history of American Presbyterianism, you see a convoluted set of unions and divisions, and the OPC is part of that big picture. The roots of the OPC go back to the so-called fundamentalist modernist controversy of the early 20th century. And it's important to bear in mind that while this controversy shook up all of American Protestantism, it had its most um, public and vitriolic battles in Northern Presbyterianism. And that modifier is important because we must remember that American Presbyterianism was divided north and south from the Civil War all the way until 1983, which is when the southern and northern portions of the mainline Presbyterian Church reunited. With the early in the fundamentalist modernist controversy, liberals were denying what conservatives thought were the essentials. Some called them the fundamentals of the faith, including the inspiration and authority of Scripture, the virgin birth of Christ, his miracles, his bodily resurrection, and the like. And in the wake of that controversy, Machen published J. Gresham Machen, a professor of New Testament at Princeton Theological Seminary, which at the time was the conservative holdout from this gradual slide towards liberalism. He published the book Christianity and Liberalism in 1923. That's a book that 3 years ago was honored across in many contexts at the centennial of its publishing.
Oh.
And that book, as the title suggested, Christianity and Liberalism, Machen was positing that these are two different things. Liberalism is not a variant of Christianity. Liberalism is something altogether different from historic Christian teaching. This was a very influential book that galvanized many voices in conservatism. Machen argued that liberalism was not liberal in the classic sense of the word. It wasn't modern. It was as old as the hills, it said. It wasn't scientific as much as it claimed it was. It was rather, and most of all, it was not even Christian. It couldn't be said Christian. And he goes throughout this book to demonstrate on all the basic doctrines of Christianity, liberalism is found to be wanting. And it primarily misses the grace of the gospel. Machen said that liberalism is altogether written in the imperative mood. Liberalism is a religion that teaches good people to continue to be good people, whereas Christianity is a religion of the broken heart. It's how God redeems a sinful people. It's a gospel of grace, not a gospel of pride or a gospel of works. Now, as the controversy heated up in the Northern Presbyterian Church, the focus by the end of that decade of the 20s fell on a couple of things. First of all,
you mean the 1920s?
1920s, correct.
Right,
Thank you.
And so when you're talking about that was the group, it was called literally the Northern Presbyterian Church of America, or what was the name of the?
Yeah, the technical name was the Presbyterian Church USA.
Okay.
In the South,
not to be confused with today's USA, or
well,
I'm getting ahead of myself.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see. I guess the technical name was the Presbyterian Church in the United States of America.
Okay.
At the same time, there's another church called the Presbyterian Church in the United States.
Huh.
And that was the Southern Church. See,
okay.
This is the split peas here.
Yeah.
I tell students that all this confusion is job security for historians, because someone's got to be around to explain it. So there's a concern about Princeton Seminary, one of the seminaries of the Northern Presbyterian Church.
Mm-hmm.
And the General Assembly, under the influence of progressive voices, determines to alter the board structure of Princeton,
Mm.
and that puts modernists on the board of the seminary. In 1929, Machen views this as the end of the seminary's witness in in faithfulness to Scripture in the Westminster Confession. So he leaves and he takes some colleagues with him, and he forms Westminster's Theological Seminary in Philadelphia. Then the crisis in the church falls towards the Foreign Missions Board of the church, where it is notoriously funding voices that are not Orthodox, even voices that are even non-Christian. I mean, a very prominent example was that the PCUSA, the Northern Church, was funding the labors of Pearl Buck, an anthropologist and a novelist, excuse me, who wasn't a believer in her work in China, in other parts of Asia. And in response to this, Machen leads into the formation of the Independent Board for Presbyterian Foreign Missions, an alternative board that will ensure its missionaries are preaching the gospel on foreign soil.
Is that where Louisa Lee was one of those that? Does she send a name? Okay, another episode for another day.
Okay.
There were excuse me, a couple of. We have one in our Christian history today that is we focused on who left, who was a missionary in India, and and she left the PCUSA and because of it being too liberal, and then went back to this other
Okay, she may have numbered among them. Well, the modernists in the Presbyterian Church pursued ecclesiastical charges against Machen for disloyalty to its boards. Now, here's an interesting footnote to this story that just took place a couple of weeks ago.
Oh,
the Presbyterian Church in the USA, the mainline church, closed its mission board.
wow.
It folded it into another organization, but their missionaries are now called ecumenical liaisons or something like this, who are going to respect the interfaith connections they have with religions internationally. So, in other words, there's no longer a board of foreign missions that Machen was disloyal to anymore. And that just happened a couple of weeks ago.
Wow. Okay.
Now, and because Machen was convicted of disloyalty and he was defrocked, his ministerial credentials were suspended, and that was true of him and a few other colleagues of his. And in response to that, they formed the Presbyterian Church of America. And the date of that formation was, as you said, June 11, 1936. Now, and this was this was a departure that would lead to the church that would change its name a few years later. We'll get to that, to the Orthodox Presbyterian Church. It was a small departure of only 5,000 members out of a 2 million member church.
Wow. And
those numbers discouraged Machen. He was hoping that he would convince more of his cause. And I think the reason, one explanation for the small numbers that exited had to do with the readers of his book, Christianity and Liberalism. There were basically three parties among the ministerial membership of the Northern Presbyterian Church. There was a small group of dedicated modernists who were promoting progressive views of Christianity. There were also conservatives. Some were labeled fundamentalists. Machen didn't like the word fundamentalist, but he once said, if by fundamentalist you mean somebody who is opposed to modernism, then I am a fundamentalist of the various sort.
Okay.
But it wasn't a term of his choosing. But the vast majority of the ministerial membership were moderates. And Machen's book tried to galvanize them to see the importance of this cause. In fact, the very last chapter in his book, Christianity and Liberalism, is on the church. And he makes the point there that these vast differences between liberalism and historic Christianity are such that the differences have ecclesiastical consequences. Well, Machen, by and large, failed to rally those moderates to join him. Many thought their churches were conservative. And they thought they had a calling to stay in. They sympathized with Machen theologically, but they didn't see to going with him follow his ecclesiological consequences. So it was a small number that pulled out.
You can watch the rest of Nick's interview with John Muether on the Center for Christian History website at centerforchristianhistory.com. This Week in Christian History is produced for the Center for Christian History by Blue and Gold Media at Mississippi College, in cooperation with the MC Department of Communication. For episode transcripts and more information, visit centerforchristianhistory.com. Be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube Music, or wherever fine podcasts are found. Our next episode is coming next week. Thank you for listening.